So we're at the final interview for tonight, and it is he goes by G. Douglas Davis the fourth, but his name is coming up as Douglas Holliday, and he's a poet and an author. And he won when we did the Black Authors Matter TV Awards. He won in 2022 in the biography category. So, and I see he's turned some lights on his face, so he's not
He
sitting
was
there
going to
in the
be
dark.
incognito during the
And
interview.
we need a light. We need the light back on so we can see you. And there you go. So, Douglas, welcome back to Black Authors Matter TV. Back on, so and you need to turn
Uh,
off the other
I,
the whatever
I
device you
need to
have.
I need to turn one of these off, right?
Yes, you need to turn the sound off on whatever device you have. And you need to turn off the whatever device. Okay, so do you have it off now?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I could hear you before, but I could also hear myself with the six
Okay.
second delay.
Yeah, I had two screens on because I'm glad you guys told us to log in early because
Yes.
as it turned out, I had to do a update.
Oh, a Zoom
So
update?
I was afraid that the update was not going to be in time. It was dragging.
Yeah.
And so
Zoom is was
I'm
it a
just happy
Zoom
that everything
update?
worked out.
Was it a Zoom update?
Yeah, it was a Zoom meeting update, and
Okay, yeah.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah, they do that all the time. And it doesn't take that long. But I log on normally. I'm logged on 20 minutes before, just in
Okay.
case
Yeah, yeah. I just wasn't anticipating
to work all that out.
an update. Yeah.
But anyway, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
I want to somewhat apologize for my first interview with you guys 2 years ago. It just did not work out well, only because I'm an idiot. I had my earphones on, and I'm spoiled by my earphones. And as it turns out, if I have my earphones in, you guys don't hear me or I don't hear you. So it just got discombobulated.
Well, you're not alone. We have tech problems every now and then with um the guests, and usually it's because they're not on Zoom often.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And
I'm
so,
not, even though I'm retired and all that good stuff, I no longer have to do Zoom meetings. And I think I did maybe one, and that was with my health professional one time only this year. So I don't do these a lot.
yeah, and
Mhm.
this is different from like, uh just talking to people because you're on camera and it's being broadcast, it's live stream. And we have a lot of viewers, and then it's also it stays, we boost the show for 10 days after. So normally, at least 5 6,000 views of every episode, and sometimes 10,000, just depends on the episode. So a
Is
lot of
that
people see it, so it's different from just like a Zoom meeting like that you might have
mhm.
with your at work or whatever. So, and some people turn the cameras off on those.
Mm.
Anyway, um, you have right.
What I couldn't find on my computer or my laptop that I'm using is the filter button, so that I could be so that I could look better. You guys are just stuck with what you got on your end.
Oh well,
That's the way I approach this.
you look fine. You look fine. So you perform poetry live. You do.
Yeah, I do. Years ago, I used to do a lot of open mics, but now that I'm aging out, I'm no longer interested in that, doing too much of that. It involves standing around reading, waiting for other people to read, and not being just, patient enough to want to get through that. So I don't do too much of the open mic part of my art form, if you will, because that's what the art to be a poet, you almost have to be engaged in open mics. And I just don't do quite as much of that as I did when I was younger,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah, it generally is for what is millennials or whatever the
Yeah. People who are getting up there today
Gen
are doing a
Z
lot of
to answer with that.
freestyle or you
Oh,
know,
okay.
other types of styles of writing that. And when they're reading from their phones, see, my attitude is now that when I see these kids reading from their phones, they're not really doing open mic. That's just my attitude about it. It's a different kind of atmosphere when you standing there reading from your phone. I guess in 10,
Really
15
different when
years.
you're actually saying it from your head. I like going to open mics, and I love when the spoken word artist gets up and they just spit. We're not reading anything, just going right from the top of the head. It's like they were a lot more passionate with it. I think it.
Exactly. So we're not, excuse me, we're not seeing a lot of that anymore. We're just seeing some of what we already said is a lot of people just getting up there, kind of reading from their phones and walking off. And it's no longer the same kind of environment when I was younger. So
Hmm,
um, that um, that influenced my attitude toward open mic.
that's
Um,
interesting. We
mhm.
used to do a poetry slam at the National Black Book Festival.
Okay.
I don't know, Rhonda, you were coming when we did the poetry
No,
slam.
I don't think so.
I want to say it was like year three to maybe year 11. This is year 18 coming up.
Mhm.
So um, we had a competition and we would have judges and they would give it a score and then it was a cash prize.
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't mind judging slam poetry, but my poetry is not about slam. It's not, I don't do that. Now I can do some of my poetry completely from rote, meaning from memory.
right.
I
Mhm.
can't what I don't do is this long stuff that people are considering slam poetry. So
Hmm.
there's a kind of quote unquote prejudice there for me that's a great art form, but it's nothing that I ever engaged in too much, you know.
Hmm. Well, you learn. I'm not a poet, so I didn't know about the changes in the industry, so to speak.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm. But we used to do that, and it was interesting because everybody always thought they should win, and everybody can't win.
Yeah,
Just the nature of it.
these kids and these individuals put a lot of work into writing the slam poetry. It's long diatribe of sorts, if you will. Then they've got to commit it to memory,
Hmm.
and then they've got to perform it. There's three different kinds of aspects to this.
Right.
And
Mhm.
some of them don't write well. I'm just being kind of honest of sorts. Some of them perform well, but they don't necessarily have written something well. So there's a whole lot of aspects involved in the ingredients, if you will, that goes into creating this slam poetry. And like I said, I don't take away from those artists who do it, all well and good. It's just not my thing.
Well, speaking of ingredients, what are some of, because I help people to self-publish their books. I do a self-publishing service for
Mhm.
for people who just want to and don't know how. But I've had poets who want to come to me and they want to put their poetry in a book.
Mhm.
What are some things that they should keep in mind? Because sometimes doing an open mic
You're right.
and spitting your poetry is totally different
Mhm.
from writing it down. And now somebody else has to read it and they have to try to get that same feeling that you were trying to convey when you wrote it down.
Exactly. The a couple of years ago, when I was a volunteer inside of a state prison for men, I would tell those gentlemen who wanted to do the similar type of thing. They enjoying slam poetry and they hope to one day get out and be able to do this art form. What goes into it? Well, primarily one thing that goes into it is some education. You have to be educated about how to write. Writing is not just something that you put some words down on a page and hope that everybody else is going to understand it. So doing a little studying about how to write is one aspect of it. Then, of course, it's what's your message going to be? What are you
Right.
hoping to convey to your audience? And then they have to get on track about that. Then they have to also understand that, well, if you're going to write it, you're also going to have to want to perform it. So you have to get past your shy stage, if you will, and go ahead and get up on stage, take the nerve to, open up and express this art form that you spent some time in. Now, self-publishing, like you mentioned, is something that I do a lot, and we can talk about that. But self-publishing is the same thing. You can't submit to your publisher a piece of garbage. Let's just
Mm,
be real honest, okay? Your writing has to be sharp. It has to be kind of edited by yourself first as you're putting it together. Then the publishing team of the publishers will look at it, and if you pay them a certain amount of money for copy editing, they will then go in and put your periods in the correct place, your commas, your grammar. They will fix it up a little bit for you, right? And then they will do the next part of the work of formatting and putting it into a book form. So there's those ingredients. Now, some people, even the guys inside of a prison, don't have the patience for this. They don't seem to understand that this is an art form that you have to invest in. You have
yes.
to be able to commit yourself to understanding that we overnight, we writers, some of the people that came before me this evening, and many of the others that you've had interviewed, as many of the others that are out there, those of us who take this serious, we know that we've got to commit ourselves to the time, to the work that goes into coming from starting from the first word of either the novel or the first word of a poem, and then what the last word is going to be as well. So we put that all into it. Then when we're ready to publish, again, we have to commit ourselves to submitting a manuscript that's readable, right? The publisher is not gonna sit there and suffer through someone else's bad writing. They're
Right.
gonna they're gonna hope that you're submitting something that is legible and that you can work with your publisher to fix up certain areas. Because after the publisher gets the manuscript, they do a what? They do a rough draft layout of the book, the interior, what it's going to look like. They submit it back to the authors, right? So that we authors get a copy of the book prior to us
Proof.
release, and we
Mm,
get to do the editing, right? We have to do the editing. We have to be involved in now reading it for yet a ninth time, a
mm,
15th time, however many times it took to commit to that work. And then once we're ready to, we make all the corrections, we give them on a separate sheet of those corrections. The publishing team again looks at the edits that are going to be made. They put them in per what the author wants to have happen, and
mm.
then now everybody has to agree that this is going to be the book that we're going to release. Okay, so I hope that answers your question and maybe questions for some of the audience, but that's kind of how a lot of this happens. When I'm up to my quote unquote ninth and tenth book, I knew from the start. I'm gonna just go off to the side for a minute. I knew from the start of starting with a chapbook, okay, of my poetry, that eventually I would want it to go into a book form. So I
Mm.
knew what the work that it took to even just commit to creating a chapbook of 50 poems. I knew that if I was going to write my own autobiography, it was going to take a lot of work. And the work was just not in the writing, it's also in the researching. It's also in going back into these foster homes that I'll talk about briefly, looking at those and getting a sense of what the environment was when I was young, and now that I'm older, or when I was writing at a certain age, what that feels like, and capturing those emotions, capturing the feelings of the time is also what goes into the writing, and that's what these authors and especially the slam poets, they miss a little bit about what the emotion is, what the feeling is behind something. They're just spitting out a lot of words, hoping that the rest of us are both hearing it and experiencing it, and that the two of those things are separate. The
Overwhelmed
two
by
of
it.
those things. I'm
Do
sorry,
you
go ahead.
think that they are sort of treating it like rap?
It's a little bit of yes, a little bit of it is kind of the rap form, if you will. Yes, I agree. There's that element of it or that essence of it, but it's still missing something. It's missing the emotion, the feeling behind what I told men inside of a prison is when you put words on page, those words have feeling. They have an essence. They have a certain kind of vibe that you want to try to convey to your audience. Without presenting that, we're just going to hear you kind of reading something to us, and you're going to lose us real quick in the process. Um,
Now, how did that turn out when you were working with them on writing poetry in the prison? What was the ultimate outcome? Was it like a certain number of sessions and then they did some
well, what
spoken
I did
word
was
or what?
I went in there every Monday for about 6, almost 7 years. So
Oh,
there's a lot of visits. And I brought poetry in with them. I made copies of things back at work that I'd have enough copies for the room to read. Sometimes we went away from poetry and I actually brought them in whole plays. We read plays like say The Merchant of Venice or Arsenic and Old Lace was a fun one. So the point being is that I wanted to get them to read, but also get them to understand that there's feelings and emotions that go in behind these words. Okay. So then I'll go backwards for a minute. One of the other reasons why I left the open mic scene for a part was that there wasn't any more emotion or feelings behind a lot of what people were writing and spilling out on the stage, so to speak. And that takes away from the whole enjoyment or the whole involvement, if you will, behind poetry. And um that's what changed my attitude a little bit. But to answer your question, that's exactly what I was trying to do with the guys inside of a prison. Get them to understand that your words, you have to be able to choose the right words, convey the right emotion, and keep your audience certainly involved, attentive to what you're doing, even from writing a letter to a family member to writing this poetry or even doing slam. And I'd let them experiment with slam and quote unquote rap poetry. And then I'd tell them kind of what's missing. I sat here for close to half an hour with you guys, 45 minutes, and I didn't get much out of it because, and we talk about that and we
hmm.
quote unquote argue about it, because lots of them just want to argue for the sake of arguing.
You don't seem to hold anything back. You say what you feel. I can tell.
Yeah, that's exactly what one of my curses are, if you will, so to speak. Um, I
Now,
was
did you
hoping,
do this for a volunteer effort or was
yeah, it was
it
just
part of your
volunteer.
profession?
No, it was just volunteer. I was at a social event with a bunch of other poets one evening, say for the holiday season. This was a number of years ago, and the two individuals who were doing the workshop inside this prison, they could no longer do it. They were very disabled, and they decided we can't do it, and they just simply said to me, "Douglas, can you do it?" And I, without thinking or blinking or stalling or anything, I said, "Yes, I'll do it." And I just literally went in there kind of blind at the start, and I had a lot of fun with it. But what got in the way of me doing further work with it is administration. Once administration steps in, they can sabotage a good wet dream, excuse the expression, if if allowed. So they simply destroyed the atmosphere. Most of the prisons don't want us, meaning us volunteers, to come in to work with the prisoners because they have their issues. Let's just leave it at that. So once those issues got in the way, and I was already having issues, if you will, with my employer, I figured this was just too much issues around me. I got to get away from something. So that's how that worked out.
We don't think about those challenges when we're going into the prison. Some people think it's the prisoner, but it's not always the prisoner
Mhm.
that's the issue. Sometimes it could be the guards.
Exactly. The guards can be disruptive. Some guards were relatively good to us, but there were these other guards who we just knew didn't care for our presence. Like we were disturbing something that was sacred to them personally, and that's not what the case was. And they certainly didn't like when the men came out of a classroom with me for the rest, when the session was over, the men might be feeling good about either a play we read or a poem, several poems or whatever. They didn't really care for the men feeling quote unquote good about something. Okay. And
Yeah, and they probably were feeling good about themselves, the men that were in the prison. After having a session where they get to use their minds and
Mhm.
their talents for something,
Yeah.
then that elevated their self-esteem, so to speak, even for a few minutes.
Mhm.
And some people who work in prisons, they, you have all kind of personalities that do those jobs, and some don't really want to be there, or it's like a power trip, or
Yeah. And even the man, I refer to him as a man, but that I'm being generous. The guy who was responsible for this particular poetry workshop, he was more disruptive than the guards themselves at times. Meaning
mm,
it was like an inconvenience to him to do this little simple job of getting a volunteer through the gates, letting them do their workshop and just do that every Monday. But it seemed to be a hassle for this person to even want to be involved in that small little aspect of giving something to people who were just deprived of books and literature and thinking and feeling. Okay. Because I had to tell the man again, poetry is about thinking, but it's also about what? Feelings. You got to be able to convey your feelings. If you're angry about something, you can write about that anger in poetry.
yeah,
Right.
that's true.
Okay.
Hmm.
But
Sometimes it's a great outlet.
Yeah.
exactly, it's very therapeutic, but it's also something that comes with the writing process. Even when we're writing novels, those
Mhm.
authors around me who are writing novels, myself just writing prose is what we might refer to it as. They there's an emotion that goes into that, and sometimes if I cry over one of my poems or even a poem that somebody else wrote, say Sonia Sanchez or June Jordan or Sapphire, Dudley Randall, I have an emotion about their poetry. When I do my own poetry, I'm going to try to what? Recreate that, uh, uh, establish that same type of emotion if that's what's called to do in a particular section of a book or throughout a piece of poetry. And I'm hoping that maybe I'll get to do one or two poems for us this evening while
Well,
we're talking.
Well,
we're
you better
in our
look
last
out.
5 minutes, so if you're
Oh,
gonna
we're in our
do
last 5 minutes
you need
already?
to do it. Yeah, we
Oh my
if
God.
you're
But
gonna do it, you need
oh
to do
my
it.
God. Well, you didn't have me see
To
all
be
the other authors you talked to, you had them hold up their new books and
well, you held up
see,
your book.
You've been
I didn't
spitting facts. We
I didn't
wanted to
hold up
out.
I didn't hold up the
The new
book.
one. Okay.
This is the
Okay.
new
Death
book.
of
This is
Grand
the new
Uncles.
book. Okay,
Okay.
Death of Granduncles. You can see that.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
Okay.
I saw that
But
you
it's also a
um,
flip book. It's
wow.
going to be a flip book
Okay.
this year. So when you flip
Oh,
it over, you get the poetry section. See, all of my books, whether I did my
okay.
autobiography, whether I did the book that I re-released, I used to
Oh,
fall down,
oh,
have a poetry section in them. So where I write
okay.
prose, but then I do poetry. So when I finished um, Death of Granduncles, there's not going to be any poetry specifically in this section of the book. But
Okay.
in
But
order to
when you
submit
flip it,
poetry, I decided I was going to tackle what I refer to, and people have heard me, or maybe not have heard me refer to it as my Jewish problem. Okay, so in Proud Anti-Semite, thanks to Benjamin Netanyahu, that's the poetry section. And I know that's going to be difficult for some people to like want to get into about the present conflict between the Jews and the Arabs in Palestine. but I've been dealing with it from that first chapbook that I showed you up until this book. Plus, my master's degree is in Jewish Holocaust literature and African American literature. So
Oh,
I'm a little bit learned about their Holocaust, but the Jews don't want me to talk against their Holocaust and genocide over in Palestine today, because then if I do that, they call me an anti-Semite. Well, I said my attitude toward it was, call me an anti-Semite, but I'm going to be proud about it, because it's got to be, many of us authors are going to talk about it. Many people who are not even authors are going to talk against genocide and a Holocaust going on over there. So I'll be brief about that, since that's our time
okay.
is running
So
out.
you got 2 minutes to
All
do
right,
some
two books
poetry.
and two books
Two,
in
two
one.
minutes. You got two
All right.
minutes
Let,
to
let me
do.
just say this.
Okay. Because we always close the show at 9 straight up, which is, I
Yeah,
don't know where you are in
yeah.
the country,
I,
but to be 10.
so one of the books I have in my home here is called Holocaust Poetry, right?
Okay.
Because I wanted to read. I read a lot about that literature, but I'm going to recite from the top of my head one of the poems that is in this book. I can't find it immediately and tell you who the author is, but this is a short poem. Okay,
Okay. All right.
short.
Okay.
It's called Written in a Sealed Railway Car. Okay, written in pencil in a sealed railway car. In this carload, I am Eve, with Abel, my son. If you see my other son, Cain, son of man, tell him that okay? That's the whole poem. It just comes with the word, those last few words are haunting. Tell him that and that's
Oh,
all she was able to write, because something happens, right?
Oh,
oh,
you know
oh,
what's
okay.
crazy is when you said the name of the poem, I kind of pictured something like that happening. So that's very haunting.
Yeah, so that's one of their poems inside of a book called Holocaust
Okay.
Poetry Set Alone. But like I said, I've read it. I've read lots of other stuff on the Holocaust. I'm kind of learning about it. We can't get into it in the time remaining, but I decided I wanted to put out a book, two books, one about family issues, death in of some granduncles, and then for the poetry section, flip it over and you get to the what I refer to as my Jewish problem.
Mm.
Well, Douglas, we're at the
Mhm.
end of our time.
Mhm.
So what we want to do is have you let people know how they can
Okay,
see
so
your work.
some real cleanup work might be booktasters.com. I did a interview or a video with booktasters.com. They can go to that and catch the review and the whole they capture all of my work of sorts in a nice video. Hudson Valley Writers Guild. That's where I'm featured at. But they can see actually three of the poems that are going to be in this very new book. Um, they're not new to me so much, maybe one or two, but they are new to some people, so they can go to that. And then there's a video of me performing other poetry on youtube.com. Go to Poetry Night slash D. Alexander Holiday, and you'll see me actually performing other poetry. This was years ago, so I'm younger and lighter. My waist was thinner, whatever.
Okay. Well, most of us also had thin waists. So anyway, that's the end of our show for this week, everybody.
All right,
So
thank
we'll
you so
see
much,
you
man.
next Tuesday night on Black Authors Matter TV. And I'm Gwen Richardson signing off.
Yeah, I'm
Bye bye.
Dr. Rhonda
Thanks.
Lawson. Have a wonderful evening and a great week.
You too, guys.
Thank you.